who is with ICR. He's the president there, the Institute for Creation Research in Dallas, Texas. I'm going to say a word to those listening online. We appreciate so much you tuning in, logging on to shasta.edu. That's shasta.edu to listen to the Alpha Mega Conference, our 22nd conference. If you'd like to donate to keep this conference going, we'd appreciate that very much. We don't charge a thing for the conference, but we have to have money to pay our speakers. They fly out from across the country many times. And you can find the donate button on our website there, right there at shasta.edu. And you can participate in supporting the conference. So thank you so much for being with us online. I said that because when I first said it last time, the live stream was off. Okay. Dr. Guliuzza, of course, is with us. He's been with us many times. He's the president of the Institute for Creation Research, and we welcome him to the pulpit right now. So, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Nicholas. Always a joy to be here every time we come. It's been a blessing. I remember way back when I came early on, my youngest son was unmarried. And if you don't remember, I used to put some slides up kind of promoting him to see if I could capture on his behalf one of these Shasta gals that were here at the time, because I just thought they were the sweetest things and that they would be a good thing for him. That unfortunately, he just never measured up and I didn't get takers. And so he went off to Texas and he did marry a Texas gal in college there. And they came to hear one of the talks of my colleagues, Dr. Timothy Clary. They both went to his talk and they met each other and they got married. And now they've been married. How long have they been married, babe? 3 years? 3 years. And they have a little son who's 2 years, 4 years. They've been married 4 years and he's 2 years. Okay, my wife's giving me the numbers back there. So he's doing really well. All right, part two of yesterday's lesson. I have to have a confession. How many of you were not here for yesterday's talk? Okay, about 30%. I'll do a quickie review of what we did yesterday. We're trying to replace some thinking because Darwin gets people to believe or not believe in God by how they think about the creatures. And so we were pointing out some errors of thinking. First one is that biological change is random or purposeless. We went through multiple slides that show the recent findings in science show that particularly adaptive changes that lead to your ability to adapt are not random, but they are highly regulated. Purposeless changes usually lead to diseases. These were regulated changes. So the whole idea of purposelessness was to have this idea that there is not a creator. Next, it was that organisms were passive, that it's the environment and changes in the environment which are molding and shaping relatively passive creatures. And they're molded and shaped by a phrase that evolutionists use ad nauseum. Ad nauseum, called selective pressures, where they view environmental conditions such as heat or temperature or predators or something as a pressure that is shaping and molding relatively passive creatures. And that it's the environmental conditions which are the pressures which are molding them. Of course, you can't ever quantify those because they exist only in one place, in the mind of the evolutionists. There are no selective pressures out there. And then third was the personification. So if you're taking notes, if you weren't here, it was purposeless, passive, and personification, where nature is personified as an active agent. And yesterday I mentioned that when you are looking and speaking about natural selection, as evolutionists do, within 2 to 3 words of that phrase, natural selection, you will always see a what? What did I say? A verb. A verb. Natural selection is always doing something. It's personified as an active force. So you will always see a verb. Natural selection works on. Natural selection acts on. Natural selection favors. Natural selection does something, so it's used in this verb-like sense. But this harkens back, and I didn't mention this yesterday, and everything goes back to Romans chapter 1, verses 18 through 25. It's explicating it. In verse 25, it says, and they exchanged the truth of God for a lie, or as others say, they exchanged the true God for the false. And they worshiped and served, liturgical terms. They worshiped and served the creation more than the creator. So this is a type of idolatry. Now, where does idolatry happen? So boom, I want you to imagine for just a second, right here, I put a statue. I set up a statue and everybody of you recognize, oh, that's an idol. That's an idol. And somebody comes up, maybe they're from some foreign land here, and they pray to the idol. My question to you is this. When that person comes up, maybe they drop some coins on the table to give to the idol, or maybe they pray to the idol, or they do something like that, or maybe they ring a bell to get the idol's attention, and then they pray to it. Dropping the coins, ringing the bell, praying, does that get the idol to do something for them? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. So the statue is the idol. But the statue is not, so if you're taking notes, the statue is not where idolatry exists. And most Christians don't get this. Because we're talking about, we've completely perversed, we've taken the whole biblical concept of idolatry, we made it perverse. Idolatry in the Bible was speaking of these things, idols. Not your money or not where your passions are, idols that people worshiped. That's what it was speaking about there. Idolatry exists where? In the mind of the beholder. That's where it exists. When this person thinks that praying to it is going to do it. So idolatry is not in the thing. Idolatry is a state of mind. It's a state of mind that people have. They believe that golden calf. They believe that statue of something. They believe that nature is their creator. And they worship and serve nature. How many of you have seen people worshiping and serving nature? Is it becoming more and more prevalent? Yes, yes. So that's it. And then I mentioned yesterday that Darwin changed the way people think by changing the way they view creatures. So yesterday was April 9th. April 9th. I look on the internet and I see this article here. You can't get it if you're not looking. Look at this article. What is the date of the article? It's April 9th. April 9th. There, some highly evolved peepers right up here in the front that can read this tiny little print. April 9th. April 9th. So this thing was published as I was speaking to you. And look what it says. The human body is what? Isn't a masterpiece. It's a patchwork of evolutionary compromise. Was I not saying those same things to you yesterday? I was saying the exact same thing. And so my unseen enemy says, I'll rage, I'll put it out there and I'll reinforce it. So you turn to the first paragraph. Bing. The human body is often described as a marvel of perfect design. I was saying that to you yesterday. This is what it is. Elegant, efficient, finely tuned for its purpose. Yet when we look close, a rather different picture emerges. This is the picture they're going to tell you. Next paragraph. Far from being a flawless machine, the body reads more like a patchwork of compromises, shaped by millions of years of evolutionary what? Tinkering. Well, it doesn't make any difference that who's tinkering. The tinkering is done by their idol. That's who the tinkering is done by. The tinkering is done by their idol. It's natural selection which is doing the tinkering. Evolution does not design structures from scratch. Rather, it modifies what already exists. So this is how they believe. And I popped up at the beginning, first slide, yesterday's talk was this. Darwin changed the way people think about God by changing the way they think about his creatures. Does that article change the way people think about creatures? Yes. He said they're a natural product. Articles say that? Yes. You better believe it did. It said they were a product of millions of years of evolutionary tinkering. So yes, it did say they were a natural product on that. Yes. Number 2, said they were cobbled together. They didn't say cobbled together. They said they were what? Tinkered. Vestigial parts. Work in progress. And didn't say anything about struggle to survive, but it's a struggle to survive on all of that. So this is exactly where the name of the game is. This is it. Evolutionists are not coming out to your kids and everybody else and saying there is no God. They're saying all the evidence, the primary evidence for the God, is wrong. And so they're changing the way people think about God by these types of articles, which came out just yesterday, that it's not a masterpiece. And then people, your children say, they don't come out, they go, I don't know. They just start to have doubts. Why would a God, particularly the God of the Bible, do anything like this? And the answer is, he wouldn't. He wouldn't. And there's where the doubts come in. That's where the doubts come in. So all of this is to get the linkages to see how the thinking happens. You can't really engage your opposition unless you know how the opposition thinks and you know where they're coming from, and then you can grab onto it. So what we need to do is we need to change this perception, and this is part of today's talk. And another creationist, Paul Nelson, very smart thinker, I wish I would have come up with this statement, but it's his. We need to do biology as if Darwin had not been born. That's true on that. So what would biology look like if he had not been born? It may be different, it may not. But this is how I would do it. I would begin with a hypothesis, because real scientific theories are based on hypotheses. I think that organisms look highly engineered because they are highly engineered. But that gives me something to test. As a scientist. I can test whether they have these features of engineering. Some of my tests are just mere observations. For instance, I can see an engine. I know that the engine is highly engineered. And if I were to see this engine running, I would see these features of an engineered thing. I would see numerous interconnected parts, or yesterday I said multiple parts working together for a purpose. A particular arrangement of those parts. Does everybody see there's a particular arrangement on that? Proper alignment, moving parts, precise timing, exact dimensions, fit and finish. There's even a specific way that you have to put this together. Is there not? So all of those things. So you see those. Now when you look at creatures, intuitively, you are seeing the same thing. You're seeing the same things. Do you see interconnected parts, precise timing, exact fit and finish? On me, of course, on all of those things. You see those things, a precise order of putting it together. So we're seeing corresponding. So here's test number 1. Do I observe the same features? Yes, I do. So this is really what general revelation is. General revelation is this: the engineered workmanship that is seen in living creatures that corresponds to the engineered workmanship in man-made things. That is the primary and undeniable evidence of Christ's power, his genius, and his wisdom. Now you'll notice I am really focusing biblical general revelation down to biology in so many ways. There are other things that are out there that are general revelation, but biology is the name of the game. Why do I get that? Because I go back to Romans chapter 1. It says it's what? Undeniably evident to people. That means the people did not have to have a telescope to see it, and they didn't have to have a microscope to see it. You don't have to have these tools. It means everybody without any tools can see it, can see it. And that's what you see. If I hold up a rock's not telling me much about engineering. It's not telling me much. But you hold up a bird, and there's a big difference between a rock and a bird. And the bird is what's saying, this came from something. This came from something on that. That's why biology is really the name of the game. All right, so how are we going to change our thinking and maybe change other people's thinking? Well, we have 5 rules that we want to go through today. The rule number 1 is by far the most important. And we've written numerous articles about it in the magazine that all of you by now have signed up for, which is Acts and Facts, which is our free magazine for everybody else. Now, if you look on my slides, you'll see a vehicle up there. It's a what? Space shuttle. Voila. Look at last month's Acts and Facts. It's got a space shuttle on it. As you think about living creatures, think about this space shuttle. Why? Because this space shuttle was engineered to go to all these different environments. Engineers made it so it could go to all those different environments. Do all these environments have different challenges? Yes, they're all different challenges. When the Lord made creatures like human beings, he engineered us to go through all different kinds of environments as well. And so when you think about creatures, even though we're alive, it's not life that's in and of itself that we're able to study as scientists. Nobody's able to study life. So even though you study creatures, you study humans, you are not studying life. You're studying what living creatures do. What do you mean I'm not studying life? They're alive. You're not studying life. If I were to say to the scientists, give me a beaker of life. Hand me a beaker of life so I can study it. Show me some life under the microscope. Show me something like that. Nobody can do it. You can't do it. Life is immaterial. You can't put it under the microscope. I either have it or I don't. That's that. My consciousness, same thing. But my biological functions, what my cells do, what my physiology does, you can study that. You can study that. That's what we're studying. And my physiology is going to function like this. So when you think about creatures and you think about us, even though we are alive, recognize you're not studying life, you're studying how we what? Operate. How we operate. And we operate in the exact same ways as these man-made things. There's no magic in this. There's no magic in this. We operate by the exact same ways. We're problem-solving entities. This thing was made to go through all these different environments, take on the challenges and solve them. I was made to do the same thing. So you're not studying, living things are different, but you're not studying life. But when you're studying us, we're studying this exact same thing. Focus on the entity and not on the environment. Evolutionists constantly focus on the environment. The environment just is what it is. How many times I've said that? It is what it is. It is what it is. It is not doing things. The environment does not reach inside this space shuttle and operate the computers. It doesn't do things in it. The space shuttle detects what's in the environment, and the space shuttle adjusts itself. You see what I'm saying? The space shuttle is operative. The environment does not reach inside me and manipulate my genes. My body detects what's happening, and my body then manipulates my genes. And if you don't see that, you're missing the engineering. So focus on the entity, not on the environment. And all capacity of what that space shuttle will ever be able to do had to be built into the space shuttle. Does that make sense? It's not getting capacity by flying to the moon or something like that. And all my capacity and all your capacity was built into you from the beginning. These are really fundamentally different things, but evolutionists get every single one of them wrong because they don't see the additional features of design. Okay, let me illustrate it. How many of you have seen one of these babies? A dark condition motion detection garage light on there. My questions to you are this. One, does darkness turn the light on? Or does motion turn the light on? Or does darkness and motion turn the light on? How many of you say both? The answer is none. I just told you the environment does what? Nothing. Oh, kaboom ba, ba-boom ba. The environment does nothing on that. No. What's really happening here? Well, if this light is plugged in, that's where the red arrow is, it's on. If it's plugged in, it's on. If you're alive, you're on. It's like you're plugged in. You're on. You're on that. Number two, internal programming. Somewhere in this light, there's a circuit board of some sort. I guarantee it. Internal programming inside this light specifies motion and darkness to be stimuli. They are not stimuli of themselves until this says it will be a stimulus. Whoever built this could have picked up something else to be a stimulus. Could they have programmed that the rain would be on it? Yes. All right. So it's the programming which specifies what will be a stimulus. Number three, boom. They have to put a light and motion what? Sensor on it. If it's not there, if you took this baby away, could it get dark as dark could be? Would the light come on? No. So you have to put those things on there. And then internal logic is what specifies that positive motion and negative light will close the circuit, letting power go to the light bulb. That's how it works. That's how it works. Light and motion are just what? Conditions. They are what they are. They are what they are. So everything in this, light and motion, are only exposures. They're not inducers. And evolutionists constantly call these things inducers. It's the light and the motion that induced the light to come on. And that they love to say it, induced. They induced it. But they didn't induce it. The light came on of itself. Is this clear now? This is how it works. This is how living things are engineered to do what we do. This is how we relate to our environment. You take away the programming, you take away the sensor, you take away any of these things, you could be light, dark, rain, wind, the light's going to do what? Nothing. So everything is in it, in that. That's how it works. Rule number two. Adopt engineering-based assumptions to frame your interpretations on that. Adopt engineering-based assumptions. Or we could do a quiz of Dr. Feinberg now on that. on all of these things. Like what? Like what kind of assumptions? First of all, I may assume, because creatures are engineered, I'm going to assume, since I have a research project from this, I'm going to assume that all biological functions can be reverse engineered. Is that true? Yes. So far, it is. Am I talking about life? The answer is no. I'm talking about the biological functions of organisms. Can any biologist reverse engineer life itself? No, because you can't even hang on to it. It's immaterial. So all biological functions. So let's say I have the biological function of metabolism. Will we be able to reverse engineer metabolism? Growth, reproduction. Yes, yes, yes. So I'm going to assume that these things can be reversed engineered. This is a major break from evolutionary theory. I'm going to assume that biological functions can only be accurately explained by the use of engineering principles. In other words, you must get into the realm of engineering and you must apply engineering-based thinking if you want to really understand how organisms work. And if you don't get into the realm of engineering, you'll be like these evolutionists whose explanations are constantly chaotic and making no sense and going nowhere. So, if you want to be able to explain these, if you want to make correct cause and effect associations, you must adopt engineering principles to do it. Number 3 on that, I'm going to predict and assume that everything inside of me has a control system for it. A control system. That if you look, you will find the control system for whatever X is happening on my body. I'm predicting it will be there. Even if we don't know what it is right now, I'm predicting from an engineering perspective, if you look, you will find it. If you look, you'll find it because control systems will be there. Because, as I said earlier, there's no magic. There's no magic. And evolutionists roll magic into their explanations constantly. There's always magic in there. I'm saying, no, this is highly engineered. There's no magic. There will be control systems. I will look for it on that. And number 4, I'm looking for goal-directed activity at every single research level. So I'm at the body, at the organs, at the systems, at the cells, at the organelles in the cells. Purpose, 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 purpose. And how far down does the purpose go? As far as we can go. Because that's how the Lord Jesus made it. He put purpose in everything. And these are just one of dozens, but these are just giving you examples of how I begin to think differently, radically differently about creatures. And this is liberating, and this is highly useful for science. This is very good for science. So we're making improvements. Rule number 3. First, creatures are operating like space shuttles, all capacities internal on that. Rule number 2 is we want to have the right assumptions. Rule number 3 is that solutions precede the challenges. They're not due to the challenges. So when evolutionists see a selective pressure working on a creature, they say that produced the results. Wrong. It doesn't. Solutions precede the challenges. They're not due to them. And therefore, I predict upfront capability has been engineered into the creatures. So whatever environmental challenges that the Lord, so let's just use the space shuttle first. Whatever environmental challenges the engineers foresaw that this shuttle would go to, they put the solutions into it up front. Whatever challenges the Lord wants me as a creature to be able to face, he puts the solutions up front. This is completely different from the evolutionary pressures that evolutionists see. Here's evolutionary pressures. This is how they envision things get better over time. Everything is survival of the fittest. They're completely confused about their own theory, but they see that cheetah as a selective pressure or an evolutionary pressure right here for this gazelle on that. They see that this cheetah is making gazelles get faster on that. And they see faster running gazelles as a pressure to make cheetahs get what? Faster. They see each of these things as a pressure on each other. And that the reason why cheetahs are fast is because gazelles are fast. And the reason why gazelles are fast is because cheetahs are fast. That is, it is. But anyway, this is how they see it. Here's a little parenthetical thought. Most creationists see it exactly the same way, which means most creationists they're thinking ridiculous too. They're thinking ridiculous too. Besides, evolutionary theory was never cheetah against gazelle. It was never cheetah against gazelle. Evolutionary theory said for any population, there are more offspring born than resources available to them. And so gazelles are not competing against cheetahs. Per evolutionary thinking, gazelles are competing against what? Gazelles. Gazelles are competing against gazelles. And cheetahs are competing against cheetahs. That's how it really works. So even this thinking is completely wrong. But like most evolutionary thinking, it's wrong altogether. Because now, when you look at the fossils of pronghorns in North America, there was a North America cheetah that they can find the fossils of as well. And when you do the research on the North American gazelles, fossils show pronghorn speed predates the American cheetah. That means before the cheetahs ever got to North America, by their thinking, when you look at the anatomy of pronghorn gazelles, they were already what? Fast. They were already fast before the selective pressure ever got to them. The pronghorns were already built for running millions of years before the North America cheetah appeared on the continent. Pronghorns have this built for running that existed well before the American cheetah ever came about. You know what that means? It means exactly what I'm saying. Organisms were pre-equipped with their capability up front. Up front. That means when the Lord Jesus built pronghorns, he made them right from the beginning what? Fast. He made them fast on there. Here's another one. Pre-existing. This just came out what? February 20th. February 20th. Don't let anybody think I give you leftovers here on my talks. Scientists warn 5,000-year-old ice cave bacteria resistant to modern antibiotics. So they went in this ice cave. They took out a massive core of ice. Way in the back, there was a bacteria which was still alive. It's still alive, and when you test it, it already has resistance to these antibiotics. It's not due to the antibiotics. It had the ability before the antibiotics were ever there. And here's my favorite one of capability that pre-exists. What planet is this? Mars. You know, it's about the same size as Earth and bathed by the same sun. How much life is on Mars? Zero. None. As far as you can tell, we've been looking because we want to find it. We want to find it on that. They definitely don't have yeast on Mars. There's no yeast on Mars, but these scientists did research on yeast and exposed them to the conditions on Mars. And this is what they found. We were surprised to observe yeast surviving Mars-like stress conditions we used in our experiments. Raju said, already a study of the author. So yeast have never been to Mars. Mars doesn't have any yeast. But if you could take these yeast to Mars, they would already have the capability to resist some of the stresses on Mars. That's built-in, upfront capability. It's there before the stresses. It's not due to the stresses. Can everybody see that? It's not due to the stresses. So, upfront engineered capability is the scientific antithesis of evolutionary selective pressures or evolutionary pressures. These creatures have the capabilities already. Question, if this was a theology class or something, do creatures have, if creatures have built-in capability up front, do they have unlimited built-in capabilities? No, they don't have unlimited capabilities. Are any creatures a super creature? Are any creatures invulnerable? No, no, no on all of that. So the Lord Jesus, he gives us a great abilities. He engineers us up front with capabilities, but he did not make us invulnerable. Invulnerable. So here's a question. If I would have gone up to Adam before he ever sinned, and I were to grab his arm with great strength, could I have snapped his bone? Yes. Of course I could have. He wasn't Superman. He would have broken. He could have broken on that. There was something that kept him from breaking. But could he break? You bet. On that. If Adam had never sinned, Adam and Eve had never sinned, would we be going around naked? No. 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 We wouldn't have been going around naked. How many of you, let's assume Adam had not sinned. No sin came into the world. People would have developed. Technology would have developed. We would have started melting iron ore. How many of you want to work in that factory naked? Nobody does. Even if there was no sin. No sin. If you got next to a blast furnace naked, what would happen to you? You would what? You would burn. These are misconceptions people have. Misconceptions. The whole talk about naked has nothing to do whether we would walk around naked or not. It's talking about a state of moral purity, innocence that they had. Not that humans would not have needed clothes or anything like that, or protective gear if Adam hadn't sinned. All right, that's just enough to clear up those misunderstandings. Rule number 4. Explanations sounding silly for man-made entities should not be used for organisms. Should not be used for organisms. Okay, here's a great example of that. I have a space shuttle. Look at all those different environments. It launches, it gets out in space, boom. Over there, it's coming back through the atmosphere and facing intense heat, which is what the Artemis capsule is going to do too, as well. It's going to face intense heat, and then it lands. Has to go through that and touch down. All these different environments on that. That happens most of the time on that, right through there, but one time it didn't. It didn't. And this space shuttle burned up. And everybody was killed. So now we want to find out why. Why does this happen most of the time, but why did this happen at least one time? And I guarantee you some engineers were assigned that problem. They were assigned that problem. What would happen to these engineers if they came out and they said, well, this one was selected for, and this one was selected against? And that's their explanation. We write it up. Boss, this one was selected for, this one was selected against. You would get fired. You would get fired. Because in every other realm, this kind of thinking, this magical kind of mystical type of thinking would never fly. It would never fly. It sounds stupid, doesn't it? It sounds utterly stupid. So when an organism successfully solves a challenge, and you want to figure out what it is, you look at the traits of the organism and you look at what traits are solving the problems. And when an organism doesn't solve a problem, you look at the what? The traits of the organism, and you see which traits did not solve the problem. Does that make sense? That's how you do it. That's how you do it. Because success or failure will always come down to the environment? No. It will always come down to the organism, the traits. It always comes down to that. Here's another quickie example. This is down in Florida. Massive, oops, come on, get off the screen. Down in Florida, massive hurricane came through. Look what it did to this neighborhood. It flattened all the houses, except this one. This one. Was this one favored by the hurricane? Was this one selected for and these others selected against? No. No. You know what? This house was built to survive. And that's what the owner said. We intended to build it to survive. If you want it to last, you have to build it above and beyond. And so the reason why this house is here is not because it was favored or any other magical thing, is it has the traits or engineering or features, whatever you want to say, it has the features to withstand hurricanes. Is this house invulnerable, though? Could you come up with a big enough hurricane to even flatten this? Of course you could. Of course you could. That's how it works in engineering. You could come up with something to flatten that. But for the hurricanes that they're getting in Florida, it had the features to withstand. That's how it works in biology. So you want to figure out why the creatures are doing something. Don't study the environment, study the creatures. Study what's going on within them. Rule number 5, last one. What organisms do, just like this thing, is they're able to continuously track the environmental changes around them. Organisms have the ability to continuously track, due to sensors, what's happening around them. They can change in real time. They can change over months. They can change over their lifetime, and they can even pass on some of those changes to their offspring. So it goes from very quick changes all the way to multi-generational changes. Multi-generation. It spans the whole span on all of that. Creatures use numerous mechanisms to track their environmental changes, and many mechanisms that they're using correspond to the same engineering elements as human tracking systems. As human tracking systems, therefore they can be engineered. I've shown this picture here before. I know I have. This is an early self-propelled car, automated car. There's no driver in this car. It's made by GM, and I like it because it shows all of the sensors that are around it. Now the newer cars are kind of hidden. They're hidden inside. But there's computers inside this, and this car can track its conditions, go around traffic jams and all kinds of things. On the right-hand side are guinea pigs, which can tweak their own DNA to respond to climate change. Now, of course, the average creationist is going to glom on to climate change. Say, climate change, climate change. Christians, stay on the main thing. The main thing on this slide is that creatures can do what? Tweak their own DNA. Now that's cool. Now that's cool. Took these male guinea pigs and they put them in cages and heated them up there for 70 days, the time it takes to make one complete cycle of sperm, from going from a stem cell to a swimming cell. Then they mated them with guinea pigs, females that were not heated up in cages, and she had pups. And they're able to check the pups, able to sequence their DNA and things, and guess what? 18 genes in the pups are changed, and they enable the pups to live in hotter conditions in one generation. But not only that, Dad's DNA was changed. Dad's DNA was changed, enabling Dad to work in those conditions. Now, could you have cranked the heat on the cage with the dads in it so high that it would have killed him? Of course you could have. But within ranges, the Lord built in capability to make these changes. Is that cool? That's cool. And there's going to be in Dad sensors, logic, and response mechanisms. All of that within Dad. And they're going to correspond to the human engineered ones. This is called adaptive tracking. A paper just came out in 2025. What do you know? Adaptive tracking. Adaptive tracking, with this fancy phrase, ends up with seemingly neutral molecular evolution. They say in this theory, virtually all beneficial mutations, how about just say genetic changes, observed are environment specific. Adaptive tracking is continuous adaptation to changing environments fueled by beneficial genetic changes. Guess who came up with that a decade ago? ICR. ICR was putting this out over a decade ago by the same thing. And creationists were way ahead. Paper came out just a few years ago, 2022. Direct observation of adaptive tracking in fruit flies. They had 10 cages with over 100,000 fruit flies in each one. They could not mate with each other, and they tracked them over the spring, summer, and fall seasons. And as they tracked them, they sampled many in the cages, and they found out that over the course of the experiment, which lasted 4 months, the researchers documented how much change in the DNA? 60%. Good grief is right. 60% changes in all of this. With this direct observation of swift and continuous adaptation in response to the environment, a phenomenon known as adaptive tracking, or as ICR called it, continuous environmental tracking, the biologists have established a new paradigm of how to think about the time scale of evolution. Rather than being slow and gradual, it's what? Fast. Here's an interesting paper. I mentioned this on Wednesday night. This one came out January 12th, 2026. CNN. Birds at college changed beak shapes during the pandemic. It might be a case of rapid evolution. This was an interesting study. This is a dark-eyed junco, and they've been studied at UCLA for decades. And guess what? There's two populations of juncos. There's some juncos that live out in the wild, and they have long, slender beaks. And then they had the juncos that were living on UCLA campus. And the juncos on campus were eating food that the students were dropping along the place, because, you know, students are neat and tidy and care about their campus on all of that. So they're eating a bunch of these French fries and things like that. And the juncos on campus had short, stubby beaks. Short, stubby beaks. And this is fascinating. Here's the years. This line here is the average for the wild juncos, wild beaks on the juncos. Here's where the beaks were during 2017, 2018, 2019. And then the pandemic hit. Boom. Students were excluded from campus. No more French fries on the ground. French fries were gone. The next year, the juncos hatched. Boom, hatched. Look where their beaks went to. Back to the wild shape. The students stayed away for the rest of the year. Beaks stayed at the wild shape, at the wild state. And then the pandemic ended. The students came back along with their French fries, and the beak shape went boom, back down. Wow. You talk about tracking your change. That's fascinating. That's utterly fascinating. Now, how do you think the evolutionists explain it? Collectively, we speculate that food waste may drive the changes of the beaks. That's exactly how they think. They have no clue that these birds may be able to detect what they're eating or what they're pecking against and adjust themselves. They see French fries as running the show because they always focus on the what? The environment. What they should be focusing on is the birds. The birds. And start looking for pressure sensors in the beak. Start looking for something that's going to say, I'm eating different food. And by the way, these are hatchlings. Hatchlings. So whatever parents were eating here, they passed on that information to those things in the shell, in the egg. That's cool. That's really cool on that. Here's another cool one. Polar bears in southern Greenland are using jumping genes to rapidly rewrite their own DNA to survive melting sea ice. Published when? December 16th, 2025. Just a few months ago on that. The study shows, for the first time, that a unique group of polar bears in the warmest part of Greenland are using jumping genes to rapidly rewrite their own DNA, which might be a desperate survival mechanism against the melting sea ice. This is commentary, by the way, the desperate survival mechanism. That's just their opinion that's been injected in. The science is this. They're using DNA, jumping genes. It's a portion of DNA which a machine can cut out a piece of DNA, transport it, paste it in on the chromosome in a different spot, changing how those bears are able to handle warmer temperatures. That's the science. And what they found is, from a group of populations, there's polar bears which are living on the north part of Greenland, which is cold. There's a group of polar bears from the same original population that have migrated to the southern part of Greenland where it's warm. And this transposable DNA boom has enabled those polar bears to live in warmer conditions. Whether they're doing it as a desperate survival mechanism remains to be seen until you can interview the polar bear. And they will tell you whether it's there or not on that. But this is what it is. Northern polar bears, southern polar bears. What is that telling you? That's telling you that the Lord engineered polar bears, even polar bears, to respond to what? All different kinds of conditions. And they're using transposable elements. And someone probably should have been thinking about transposable elements because this researcher from the University of Chicago over a decade before, 2014, he said he wrote a whole paper on how epigenetic control of mobile DNA, that's those transposable elements, is an interface between experience and genome change. In other words, the Lord built into them a way for them to sense what's happening, modify their DNA, linking their experience to changes in their DNA. And he said the preceding observations lead to the plausible hypothesis that epigenetic regulation serves as a key interface between organism life history and the agents that restructure their genomic DNA. Isn't that a cool link? So, wrapping it all up, evolutionists have this non-designed, random process. They focus on the environment, where they see passive organisms are being shaped by the vicissitudes of nature. That's a quote from evolutionary literature. They see adaptation as purposeless, undirected, random. It's trial and error, hit and miss. Everything's full and replete with chance. They see the changes as to be small, gradual, and iterative. Or as Darwin said, numerous successive slight modifications. This is their view. This is what it wraps up. Engineered biology offers a radically different way to think about the creatures. First of all, instead of focusing on the environment, we focus on the organism. Organisms are active problem-solving creatures that the Lord made us to be, that can take on challenges, not unlimited, but take on challenges, solve them, and be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. We have purposeful changes that are regulated, directed, repeatable, reversible at times. And sometimes the change can be fast, sometimes it can be slow, sometimes it can go this way, sometimes it can go that way, whatever is needed to fit in that environment. We offer a radically different way of thinking about it. Therefore, what ICR's job is to do is to change the way people think about creatures, that they are in fact engineered, the work of craftsmanship, purposeful, finished creations, and that they fit well into ecosystems. When we change people's way of thinking about creatures, we're changing the way they think about that Creator God. And that's what we need to do. That's what we're all about. If you're interested in that, you can follow us on all of these forums. If you're really, really interested and you want to stay up to speed, you want to learn about all of this, in the back, you'll see the rack with this space shuttle on it. Sign up. Sign up for this free publication. On that, this book, Evolutionary Blunders, has a lot of what I talked about in it today as well. And you can look at us on these podcasts, those kinds of things as well. Thank you, Dr. Nicholas, again for the invitation. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much. You know, this is revolutionary. I began my education at Westmont College. I was taught threshold evolution by a brilliant guy who came from Rice University to teach at Westmont. He taught me that God initiated the evolutionary process and at different times stepped out on the threshold to tweak it until he was satisfied, and it continued that way. That's what I was taught as a freshman. I raised my hand. I said, Dr. Frost, the Bible says the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and made him a man. He breathed life into him. How do you counter that? That's what Scripture says. He had no answer. Well, that's just another way of saying this. So this you've heard today is revolutionary. They have not thought through this whole thing and not realized how absolutely brilliant our God is, designing us this way. So if you want to learn this kind of information, come to Shasta Bible College. Okay. Is Mrs. Langston here? Where's Dominic? Dominic. Anybody see him? Oh, there they are. Okay, there's Ronald. Okay. Okay. You've got to have a ticket because see this up here? These are gifts given